thrift, switch, flip. In today's video, I have traded a variety of thrifted items or just things in my stash with Karen Driscoll at Scrap by Scrap. She has a lovely channel that has been around for quite a while with so many wonderful and very unique projects. I highly recommend you check out one of her more recent videos of a light bulb that she turned into a gorgeous Christmas styled Mickey. For this first project, Karen has sent me this sled, this little decor sled it had just raw wood on it. I'm just taking off the back tag and then I will be painting the front of the sled in Buttercream by Dixie Belle. Now I am going to be using this beautiful decoupage paper with a Santa on it, and I am going to be decoupaging it onto the front of my sled. I am using this paper by Decoupage Central. I got it off of the reclaimedranch.com. That is Tara's website, and she also has a YouTube channel, so I can't remember if she's the one where I saw a project done with the Santa, but as soon as I saw it on her website, I fell in love with it and ordered it. And I'm using some liquid patina to decoupage it on. One thing I will let you know, I'm so used to using recycled decoupage paper. Sometimes when I'm using some of these other papers, I feel like I'm not using them the right way, or they don't go onto my projects the same way. But it did go on without wrinkles, which I'm very happy about. And then instead of sanding it, I actually very gently tore the edges off of the project while it was still wet on the sled. Then, after pulling a bunch of Fusion paint samples out of my stash and trying to figure out which one would look the best for this project, I decided on Blue Pine by Fusion. I use that blue pine and paint the back of the sled, just the base of it. I am going to be using a different color for I don't know, what do you call that? The base, the tracks, for the legs of the sled. I'll be using a different color for that. So this is just going to go on the back, but I do get those little edges that are on the outside of those two sticks. I did end up switching to a little artist brush to get the trim and the edges of that part of the sled. To paint the two legs of the sled, I am going to be using Parchment by Fusion. And once again, I do need an artist brush, and I use an angled one for this just because I feel like I can cut in and avoid getting any of the paint onto the other part of the sled that I have already painted in blue pine. For that one part of the sled where the ribbon will go through, I am 99.9% sure that I am painting it in Oakham by Fusion. I forgot to write down what color I used, and I'm looking back at it now and I'm looking at the project right here in front of me, and I think it's Oakham by Fusion, but it might be cast iron. I apologize that I can't remember, but either way, you really want this in either a brown, a really dark brown, or a black, and that's what I was going for. I also watered it down slightly to give it a little bit more of a washed effect. If you watched my video earlier this week, you will remember that I found a variety of these little toy blocks on one of my excursions to the Goodwill outlet bins here in my area. I also found these bells, and they were actually in a bag, so I thought that was just a bunch of bells by themselves, like in a bag together, but they actually were part of some kind of like garland or some other type of hanging thing. And I decided to cut that apart so that I could use just some of the bells on this project. I ended up discovering that there was this really cute set of holly leaves with the rusty bells as almost like the berries of it, and I thought that would be a perfect touch here. I also felt that some of those bells were a little bit too big for this project, so this one offered that little embellishment that I wanted without overpowering the piece, because that Santa is really like the focal point of this project. Before I pulled the piece back together, because as you can see, the little bells fell off of the piece as I was cutting the wires apart, I decided to use some dark wax on this to, I don't know, bring out a little bit more of the details within it. It didn't make much of a difference because it is a very slick surface, but I think it added a little touch. And while I was doing that, I also decided to go around the entire outside of the sled, like on the around the edges, to kind of frame in that beautiful Santa. For my last step, I grabbed some hot glue and I'm hot gluing those little rusty bells back in place. And then I will be using that hot glue to adhere this little holly leaf set to the top left corner of my project. I also added a ribbon to the piece. I kind of played around with some different ideas of which ones I wanted, and I ended up with this kind of cream colored one. And here's a look at the finished project. For our second project today, I have this piece of wood, of scrap wood, that was a mistake project from my laser cutter. And I have left it in my stash because I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do with it. But I also didn't want to throw it out. I was trying to figure out how I could ever hide this mistake because even I feel like with decoupage paper, it would be so thin and not be able to, I guess, mask the cuts that are within it. However, one of the things that Karen sent me was a little like pack of different kinds of fabric, and I found one that I absolutely loved. I traced the scrap wood onto the fabric and then cut out a piece that was a perfect fit for the front of this board. And I figured with this thicker fabric, that would be a perfect way to mask that some of those like cuts that are in there from the laser cutter. I will say that when I used the white paint that I put down as a base, it did end up with some bleed through from the where the laser cutter had cut into that project. But I made what I think the paint as well as the decoupage medium thick enough that that will not show through when I put the fabric on. I was originally thinking of decoupaging this on as is, like using the putting down the decoupage medium and then laying down my fabric. But I wasn't sure about decoupaging on top of the fabric. That's not something I've ever done before. I actually don't really use fabric in my project, so this was definitely a challenge. But what I decided to do instead is to allow the decoupage medium to dry and then use the iron-on method, which I learned from Kendra at Late Night Creations. So here I am laying down my fabric after that decoupage medium is already dry and using my heat press and pressing it on for a good amount of time on each of the spots within this board. I know that like compared to rice paper, and I will say that's the other thing. I'm sorry, I forgot to say this. If I was using a decoupage paper, I would have parchment paper between the paper and the iron, but because this was fabric, I didn't feel the need to add on anything else. I don't know if I did it wrong, but it worked for me. I didn't have any mistakes, so we're just going to go with it. I thought this was probably the best method, and it really did adhere. I will say it was maybe 10 to 20 seconds on each spot, and as you can see, I'm still going over it. I spent a lot more time on the edges instead of the middle, mainly because I felt that those were the parts that were going to start peeling up first. So I wanted to make sure there was enough adhesion on those edges. So here I have a transfer from the Yule transfer set by IOD, and I was originally thinking about transferring it onto this fabric. Now, I've tried to do a fabric or a transfer onto fabric before. It's only worked for me like maybe a couple times. I could not get it to work today. I was trying and trying, and I was so scared that I had ruined this beautiful transfer because I was worried that it wasn't going to transfer on anything. But I came up with a secondary solution, and I am happy to report that it worked. I grabbed some music paper from my stash and ripped around the edges to create kind of that jagged, more worn look. And now I am transferring those beautiful cardinals onto the music paper. Now I'm going to take that paper and I am going to put my decoupage medium on the back of the paper. Again, this is something I have never done before, so I was super nervous of the right placement of the decoupage medium and when to cover everything. So I hope I did this right. Like I said, it ended up working, so I'm going with it until it doesn't work for me again. I am putting that liquid patina all across the back of that paper, and then I'm going to adhere it to the fabric on that board. And once that is done, I am going to seal it by putting the decoupage medium all across the top of the transfer and paper. And then, of course, it does end up covering a little bit of the fabric too. The last step before this project was done was to find a way to kind of finish off the edges as well as the back of this little shelf sitter. And I chose from folk art walnut, a walnut stain, which was actually one of my favorite ones when I first started crafting. And I still have this very first container in my stash, and it's getting down to the end, but it was perfect and a great way to finish off this piece. All right, I started this next project a while back. It's an actual, it's an LOL doll container. I don't know if you know what LOL dolls are, but my daughter is obsessed with them, and we have all these extra like balls from, how they come packaged. And I had started covering it with just some paper bag paper or whatever a while ago. It was actually going to be part of a project that I used in a video for another challenge that I was in with Kendra, and I ended up not using it. So it's been sitting in my stash waiting for the next perfect project. I decided to grab some scrap drop cloth, and what I'm doing right now is just covering the entire ball, kind of creating more of a like, I don't know, sack looking style. I didn't really know where I was going with this project. It was going to be an ornament. As you can see, I had a little hanger on it, but I ended up going a different route with this. Another thing that Karen had sent me, and I apologize, I thought I had gotten this on camera, but I didn't. It was a big bag of these flowers. I think they're paper. I'm not sure, or foam. I'm not sure what they're made out of. They're really cute, and it's something I would never would have actually purchased myself if I was like going to a craft store or getting supplies. So it was cool to work with something that I typically wouldn't. I started by trying to hot glue them onto the fabric, and it wasn't working as well as I would have liked. I was trying to figure out how to get them to stay. I ended up snipping the backs of them so that there wasn't as much of like a stem, and then I was able to adhere them better. By the way, this is in no way a promotional video, and I'm not getting any kind of kickbacks or anything for saying this, but that hot glue gun that I have, and I've linked it before, I got it off Amazon. It is incredible. So it is a battery operated one versus one that I would plug in. It's the only one I have like this. And I wanted something that I could use that wasn't, I don't know, that was not as like a Ryobi, which is super expensive. This one, in my opinion, was much more affordable, and that hot glue works very well. It gets very hot and it's able to adhere very, very well. So, if you are looking for a hot glue gun that has that durability and isn't as pricey as some of the more popular brands, I will link it down below. I definitely recommend it. Okay, all of my flowers are now adhered, and I am left with this. So it almost looks like a vase or something, but can't stand as a vase. So I'm trying to figure out now how to hide some of those like holes because I have no more flowers left. And I figured, why don't we make this a little bit festive? One of the things that I'm learning in my creative tribe that I just joined, I am learning about vignettes and about how to really add some accents to your displays. And so I thought about getting out some Christmas greenery as well as some of those other things that we would typically see with those types of projects. And so I got some berries and then some pine cones, and I am just trying to position them sporadically throughout this piece. For our last project today, I'm going to take this little shadow box that Karen sent me, and I'm going to tell you a story while you watch how I transform it into something very special. On a frosty moonlit night in the North Pole, an eager young elf named Jingle found himself entrusted with Santa's most precious tool, the magic key. This enchanted key could open any door in the world, a necessity for delivering presents to homes without chimneys. Jingle's heart swelled with pride as he jingled the key on its golden chain. "Don't let it out of your sight," Santa warned before departing to pack the sleigh. Jingle had every intention of guarding the key, but as the night went on, the excitement of the workshop distracted him. He zoomed around, helping wrap gifts, laughing with other elves, and tasting Mrs. Claus's peppermint cookies. It was during one of these frenzied sprints that the unthinkable happened. The golden chain slipped from his neck, and the magic key disappeared. "Uh-oh," Jingle whispered, his face draining of color. He frantically searched everywhere, even checking the cookie jar underneath piles of toy trains, but the key was gone, and soon it was time to load Santa's sleigh. When Santa arrived at a charming snow-covered house with no chimney, he called for the magic key. Jingle's heart sank. He knew he had no choice but to admit the truth. "Santa," he squeaked, I lost the key." Santa's eyes widened, but before he could respond, Jingle made a snap decision. "I'll fix this." He jumped off the sleigh, determined to find another way into the house. Jingle spotted a second-story window with twinkling Christmas lights inside. Maybe it was open. He raced up a nearby tree, its icy branches creaking under his weight. "Almost there," he whispered, shivering in the cold. When he reached the top, he shut his eyes and leapt toward the window. But instead of tumbling gracefully inside, he slammed face first into that closed glass. Thud! The impact sent him sliding down, landing in a heap of snow below. Stars danced in Jingle's vision as he lay in the snow, tangled in tinsel he had accidentally snagged during his fall. Groaning, he rubbed his aching head and realized he had made quite a mess. Inside, the lights flickered on and sleepy murmurs drifted from the house. But then something glinted in the moonlight beside him. The magic key! It must have fallen from the sleigh during an earlier stop. Relief flooded Jingle as he snatched it up and scrambled to his feet, brushing the snow from his tunic. He hurried back to Santa, who had been waiting patiently by the front door. "Found it," Jingle said breathlessly, holding up the key. Santa let out a deep, jolly laugh. "Good after, Jingle," Santa chuckled. "But next time, let's avoid the window crashing." Jingle's cheeks flushed red, but he couldn't keep from grinning. Despite his bumps and bruises, he had saved Christmas, and he'd never lose sight of the magic key again. I hope you enjoyed that story, as well as all of the projects, and especially this little elf, which was my absolute favorite today. I will have everything linked that I used to create this specific project in the description box below. I hope you have a wonderful week. A huge thank you to Karen at Scrap by Scrap for this amazing challenge. Have a wonderful weekend.